August 18, 1944. 2210 hours. 320 feet beneath the South China Sea. Commander Henry Munson adjusts the periscope lens, his eyes scanning the darkness above. The radar operator behind him counts contacts. 13 ships, maybe more. The largest convoy Munson has seen in months. Through the green glow of the scope, he watches shadows move against the horizon. Massive shadows. USS Rasher sits motionless in the black water. The crew knows the routine now. Silence, stillness, patience. But tonight feels different. Munson has studied the intelligence reports. Japanese Convoy HI-71, carrying thousands of soldiers desperately needed for the Philippines' defense. The convoy commanders don't know what Munson knows. American codebreakers have read their orders, plotted their course, delivered them to this precise coordinate like clockwork. Above, aboard escort carrier Tayo, Captain Kimura scans the same dark horizon. His unease is visible. The way he grips the bridge railing, the frequency with which he checks the escort positions. Since January, convoys have been bleeding. Ships disappear with terrifying regularity. The Americans call them submarines. Japanese sailors have another name, Chinmoku no Shi, the silent death. What began as scattered attacks in 1942 has become systematic destruction by 1944. Over 54% of Japan's merchant fleet will vanish beneath the waves by war's end. More than 5.5 million tons of shipping. But the true horror isn't measured in tonnage. It's measured in the tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers who will drown in darkness, trapped in sinking holds as American torpedoes tear through steel hulls. Munson gives the order. Rasher begins her approach. December 7, 1941. Most remember Pearl Harbor as an air attack. Few remember what happened in the water below. While Japanese aircraft struck the Pacific Fleet, 29 American submarines of the Asiatic Fleet waited in Philippine waters. Within hours of the attack, Admiral Thomas Hart issued the order that would define the Pacific Submarine War. Execute unrestricted submarine warfare against Japan. No warnings, no mercy. Every Japanese merchant ship was now a target. But the American submarine force wasn't ready. 55 fleet submarines and 18 obsolete S-boats comprised the entire Pacific force, barely 2% of the U.S. Navy. Worse still, they carried a weapon that didn't work. The Mark 14 torpedo, pride of American naval ordnance, was fundamentally flawed. Its magnetic exploder detonated prematurely or not at all. Its depth mechanism ran 11 feet deeper than set. Its contact exploder crumpled on impact instead of detonation. For 18 months, American submarines would fire torpedoes that simply failed to explode against Japanese hulls. Lieutenant Commander Lawson Ramage of USS Trout recorded his frustration in his patrol report. Fired 4 torpedoes at a stationary Japanese transport from 1,500 yards. All 4 hit with solid metallic clangs. None exploded. Watched helplessly as the ship sailed away undamaged. The sound of those non-explosions haunted every submariner. They called it the sound of betrayal. Japanese merchant officers in early 1942 sailed with confidence. Their military assured them American submarines posed minimal threat. Japanese anti-submarine doctrine, developed in the 1920s, assumed submarines would be used against warships in fleet actions, not against merchant vessels. Japan had never seriously prepared for a war against commerce raiders. The Imperial Japanese Navy allocated exactly 47 vessels for convoy escort duty when war began. Britain, by comparison, employed over 400 escorts in the Atlantic. By mid-1942, submarine commanders faced a crisis of confidence. Perfect setups ended in failure. Target after target sailed away untouched. The problem was threefold, though no one knew it yet. First, the Mark 14's magnetic influence exploder, designed to detonate beneath a ship's keel, triggered on the Earth's magnetic field instead. Torpedoes exploded too early, too deep, or not at all. Second, even when skippers disabled the magnetic feature, the torpedoes ran too deep. Set for 10 feet, they'd pass at 21. A perfect shot at a destroyer's waterline would run harmlessly beneath the hull. Third, when torpedoes finally reached their target at the correct depth, the contact exploder failed. The firing pin, designed to crush on impact, would crumple instead of detonation. A direct hit produced only a metallic clang. Admiral Charles Lockwood took command of the Pacific Submarine Force, determined to solve the crisis. He conducted tests that Bureau of Ordnance had never performed. Torpedoes fired at fishing nets suspended at known depths. They passed underneath every time. Torpedoes fired at Hawaiian cliffs. They struck, but didn't explode until tumbling back into deep water where pressure triggered them. The Bureau of Ordnance resisted. They had spent 20 years perfecting the Mark 14. Submarine commanders, they insisted, were simply missing their targets. But Lockwood had evidence. By mid-1943, corrections were finally implemented. Magnetic exploders deactivated, depth mechanisms adjusted, contact exploders redesigned. Once these defects were corrected, American submarines transformed into the most lethal commerce raiders in naval history. The mathematics of destruction became overwhelming. The year American submarines stopped hunting and started slaughtering. In approximately 520 war patrols that year, U.S. submarines sank 603 Japanese merchant ships, totaling 2.7 million tons, more than the first 25 months of war combined. Japanese commodity imports plunged from 16.4 million tons to 10 million tons. The net loss of shipping, 2 million tons. But the true carnage happened in the troop ship lanes. With the oceans packed with Japanese reinforcement convoys, American submarines inflicted catastrophe on the Imperial Army. The numbers are staggering. 79,004 Japanese soldiers killed in 1944 alone. By war's end, at least 97,342 Japanese soldiers would die in submarine attacks, more than the Marine Corps and U.S. Army killed in the entire Central Pacific Drive from Tarawa to Iwo Jima. The submarines had advantages Japan couldn't match. American radar allowed surface attacks at night while remaining invisible to Japanese escorts. Code breaking provided convoy routes days in advance. Submarines positioned themselves like assassins, waiting at choke points with perfect intelligence. Japanese escort vessels dropped depth charges randomly, hoping for lucky hits. American submarines dove deep, 300 feet, 400 feet, far beneath the setting of Japanese depth charges. By the time escorts arrived, the submarines had vanished into thermal layers that Japanese sonar couldn't penetrate. For Japanese soldiers ordered on board transports, the voyage became a death sentence. Officers who had sailed fearlessly now requested transfers to shore duty. Crews demanded double pay for voyages through the Luzon Strait, called by Japanese sailors Torpedo Alley.
August 18th would prove them right. 22:10 hours. Rasher fires 2 stern torpedoes at tanker Tayo Maru. Both strike. The tanker, loaded with gasoline, explodes into a column of flame 300 meters high. Pieces of the ship blow 150 meters from the burning hulk. The escorts fire wildly, dropping depth charges far behind Rasher's position. At 23:10 hours, Munson fires 6 bow torpedoes at the largest ship in the convoy. 3 torpedoes strike transport Théa Maru, the 17,830-ton former French liner. Aboard, 4,795 Japanese soldiers and 427 civilians are preparing for sleep when the torpedoes hit. The ship begins sinking immediately. Panic sweeps through the darkened holds as water rushes in. Men claw at ladders, fighting to reach the deck. Most never make it. Théa Maru sinks in approximately 4 minutes. When survivors are counted days later, 2,665 people have died. Only about 2,100 survived the initial sinking to float in storm-tossed water. Aboard escort carrier Taiyo, Captain Kamura orders aircraft to search for the attacking submarine. Before they can launch, USS Redfish fires 4 torpedoes at Taiyo. 2 strike home. The escort carrier's aviation fuel ignites. Fire spreads through the hangar deck. Taiyo sinks at approximately 22:30 hours with 850 crew members. Shortly after midnight, Rasher fires 4 more torpedoes at cargo transport Shiyun Maru. 3 hit. The ship is carrying ammunition. The resulting detonation sweeps a pressure wave over Rasher's bridge 2,000 meters away, stunning the crew. At 03:33 hours, USS Spadefish, under Lieutenant Commander Gordon Underwood, fires 6 torpedoes at landing craft depot ship Tamatsu Maru. 2 torpedoes strike. The massive 460-foot vessel rolls over and sank within minutes. 4,755 troops and 135 merchant seamen go down with the ship. In less than 5 hours, Convoy HI-71 has been destroyed. 7 ships sunk or crippled. Over 8,500 Japanese personnel killed, not a single American casualty. The submarines withdraw without damage. Rasher and Spadefish slip into deep water and vanish. Behind them, rescue vessels find Tamatsu Maru's debris field that afternoon. Approximately 2,000 bodies float in the water. Heavy seas from the typhoon that scattered the convoy prevent effective rescue operations. The psychological impact ripples through the entire Japanese merchant marine and naval command. Rear Admiral Sadao Miyazato, who will later command Convoy HI-71, writes in a confidential report to the Grand Escort Force, "The Americans have perfected submarine warfare to a degree we cannot match." But Japan doesn't have the tools to respond. Destroyer production consumes resources needed for aircraft and tanks. The best destroyers are assigned to fleet operations against American carriers. Only obsolete destroyers and converted civilian vessels serve as convoy escorts. Japanese radar development lags American technology by 3 to 4 years. The first shipboard radar units don't appear until late 1943, and installation proceeds slowly. By contrast, every American submarine carries multiple radar systems for surface search and aircraft warning by mid-1943. By late 1944, the situation has deteriorated beyond anything Japanese planners anticipated. Japan began the war with 6.4 million tons of merchant shipping. By year's end, only 2.1 million tons remain operational. New construction adds tonnage, but losses exceed everything shipyards can produce. November 1944. Convoy HI-81 attempts to transport the 23rd Division from Manchuria to the Philippines. The convoy includes escort carriers Shinyo and Akitsumaru, destroyer Kashi, multiple escort vessels, and 3 landing craft depot ships carrying 4,500 soldiers. They never reach their destination. November 17, 1944, USS Queenfish fires 4 torpedoes at escort carrier Akitsumaru. 3 torpedoes hit. The escort carrier sinks in 3 minutes. 2,046 men die, mostly soldiers of the 23rd Division trapped below decks. Hours later, USS Pakuta torpedoes landing ship Mayansan Maru. The ship explodes and sinks with 3,437 men killed. The Mayansan Maru class vessels are brand new, 460 feet long, designed specifically for troop transport. They're supposed to be safer than requisitioned merchant ships. They sink just as fast. The following night, USS Spadefish, the same submarine that destroyed Tamatsu Maru in August, attacks the convoy again. 4 torpedoes hit escort carrier Shinyo. The carrier catches fire and sinks with 1,104 Japanese sailors. Also lost, submarine chaser number 156, destroyed with all hands.
Over 4 days, Convoy HI-71 loses 4 major vessels and nearly 7,000 Japanese killed. The convoy turns back to Shanghai, reforms with replacement escorts, then splits into 2 groups. One group eventually reaches Manila on December 2nd. The other reaches Singapore on December 4th. But the 23rd Division, already decimated by sinkings, arrives without most of its heavy equipment, artillery, and supplies. The division will fight in the Philippines as light infantry, lacking the weapons needed for effective combat. Japanese military leadership can no longer deny the catastrophic effectiveness of American submarines. In December 1944, Army General Yoshijiro Umezu submits a report to the Imperial War Council. Submarine attacks have rendered seaborne reinforcement of our defensive positions impossible. The statistics support his grim assessment. Japan's merchant fleet has been effectively destroyed. By early 1945, Japan's war economy collapses, not because factories are destroyed, but because raw materials cannot reach them. Oil tankers from the Dutch East Indies are sunk before reaching Japan. Rubber, tin, and strategic materials accumulate in Southeast Asian ports but cannot be transported. Food supplies from Korea and Manchuria, desperately needed to feed Japanese civilians, cannot be delivered safely. By March 1945, Japan's oil stockpiles are essentially depleted. The combined fleet cannot sortie for lack of fuel. Aircraft sit grounded. Training flights are canceled because fuel cannot be spared. The once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy, reduced to a handful of operational warships, remains in port as floating batteries, unable to leave harbor. The numbers are devastating. Overall, U.S. Navy submarines sank around 1,300 Japanese merchant ships and roughly 200 warships. That represents 54.6% of all Japanese ships sunk during the war. The average number of naval and merchant ships sunk per patrol, 0.944. American submarine losses totaled 52 submarines sunk in combat, with 3,506 American submariners killed. This represented a 22% casualty rate, the highest of any American armed service during World War II. But the exchange ratio was devastating to Japan. For every American submarine lost, Japanese shipping losses totaled approximately 170,000 tons and thousands of personnel. The grim math discloses that for every U.S. submariner lost, about 28 Japanese soldiers perished. In April 1945, submarine USS Tirante conducts what would be one of the last major submarine actions, sinking 4 vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin. But by then, meaningful Japanese merchant shipping has ceased to exist. By summer, American submarines face an unexpected problem. They cannot find enough targets. When Japan surrenders on August 15, 1945, the merchant marine that remains consists of 1.5 million tons of mostly damaged or barely operational vessels, less than a quarter of the tonnage Japan possessed in December 1941. Of the original 6.4 million tons that existed in December 1941, plus new construction during the war, 8.8 million tons have been sunk or destroyed. The Japanese merchant fleet has been annihilated more thoroughly than any merchant fleet in history. The effectiveness of American submarines derived from multiple factors that compounded into overwhelming superiority. Technological advantage. American submarines carried surface search radar, aircraft warning radar, and sonar superior to Japanese equipment. Intelligence superiority. Code breaking provided advanced warning of convoy routes, schedules, and composition. Tactical innovation. American submarines adopted wolfpack tactics in 1943, coordinating multiple submarines against single convoys. Operational doctrine. The United States Navy quickly abandoned peacetime restrictions on submarine warfare after Pearl Harbor, authorizing unrestricted submarine warfare within hours of the attack. Industrial capacity. American shipyards produced 228 submarines during World War II, continuously replacing losses and expanding the force. Finally, crew quality. American submariners were volunteers, extensively trained, and highly motivated. No military campaign in history achieved such strategic results with such a small force. 288 American submarines, representing less than 2% of the United States Navy's tonnage, strangled an empire. For Japanese merchant mariners who survived the war, the memory of American submarines remained vivid decades later. They lived in terror of Chinmoku no Shi, the silent death that struck without warning and vanished without trace. The submarines had won completely.